topic. So anyway, and I will at the end of, so as we kind of start to draw near an end of my talk, my little portion, I'm going to share two practices that I have found useful and helpful in my personal exploration of this topic. And in the end, I will end this whole thing with the great advice from one of our great sages, and I bet you'll recognize the name. And my hope is that I will be successful in stimulating conversation around conscious dying and the continuity of consciousness. And I'm going to leave plenty of time for group discussion. So I'm going to start out tonight with a personal story. And this is the kernel of this whole sort of exploration, for me anyway, that's been going on for quite a few years. So about a dozen years ago, and maybe more, might be a little more, I had occasion to be present while a dear friend gave birth to her son. One evening, I believe it was in the fall of the year, somewhere around 9 or 9:30 p.m., I got the call. Time to get to the hospital, that baby's on his way. So I got in my car and headed to Fairview Southdale Hospital. And I believe it's called the birthplace at Fairview South now, something like that. But at any rate, my friend, Mom, got into her room, and there we waited until the next morning when things really started to happen. And I've never been present at the birth of another little human. Never saw that in my life. And oh boy, I had a front row seat. I even had a job. I got to assist Mom in maintaining a good position while she was giving birth. And soon enough, I mean, it was about 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. Everything started to change and get more busy and more serious, and more staff and more equipment was rolled in. And everyone was really excited. And one of my favorite things that happened is that the nurses who had been with us all night, like I was part of it, like with her, Mom and baby all night, they are usually off. I think they would leave at like 7 a.m. in the morning. Well, they stayed on because they wanted to be there. So I thought that was really special. And so the staff really, they know what they're doing. And and my friend was an absolute natural, despite this being her first child, and to date her only child. And so as the morning progressed and when the baby began to emerge, and I had a front row seat, I had a job. I was holding her body in a position so she could. So I was right there, and I felt. But when he started to emerge from his mother, I started to feel something unusual in my body, and it's so weird. And the atmosphere in the room began to change. And, it's just such an amazing sight to see. And I'm sure many of you have seen that and experienced it as well. But as soon as he kind of stepped into the living air, removed from his mother, as he was, I know this is going to sound funny, as he was coming out, I felt this pulling that was coming from my torso with him, in exact unison with him. And it was not subtle, and it was not, I don't know, I couldn't ignore it. So and it was like a pulling, but it was a pulling. And when he was finally clear of his mother's body, it was like as soon as he cleared, the pulling stopped and like unplugged tears in my eyes, and I just was like, what a blubbery baby I was. And the others in the room were the same. There was a couple other friends that were witnessing this, and we were all sort of experiencing this together. And at the same time, but after that had happened and the pulling had stopped, the room was really specific. There was something palpable in the air. It was palpable, and the atmosphere, like I said, was just different and unique. And I have really trouble describing it. I've never been able to, but and I've asked a few mothers about this, and they really have no idea what I'm talking about. And I just think, you know what, this is because they're busy. They have a completely different and way more important job than I did that day. So I think her experience was different than mine. So, but after the birth, when the medical team was tending to Mom, I got to hold baby boy, and I just blubbed all over him. I couldn't even believe what he was and where he came from, because he just sort of appeared through this veil. It was really cool. Yeah, and someone so tiny brought with him a great mystery, to me anyway, that day. But there's a second part to this story. And so a little background about that. Quite a few years ago, I worked as a hospice nurse's aide. And this was, oh gosh, I did this for quite a few years. And I helped people with their daily care, like getting dressed and eating and personal care and all that kind of thing. But one of the things that I had to do was up until the time of death. We that was part of my job. And so if you recall Vaughn's talk last week, where he shared a story about his friend Deb in the hospice care place where she was at, I worked at the same place. But anyway, 2 weeks after the birth of my friend's son, I had occasion to be at the bedside of a man who was in the dying process. His family had gathered, the medical staff were providing comfort care at that point, keeping him clean and comfortable, providing pain relief and symptom control, all the kind of things. Also making sure the family had everything they needed, keeping them informed, making sure they knew where the bathrooms were, where they could get a cup of coffee and something to eat. A very intense time. And his room was just lovely and peaceful, as they usually are in a hospice unit. There were flowers and everybody was gathered, and it was really lovely. But one of the things I didn't expect, and I wouldn't have had this experience had I not been present at my friend's baby son's birth, was that the air felt exactly the same as it did at the birth. and I still to this day don't know what that means, but I just said to myself at that time, it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. I don't know what that means. I still don't know what that means, but there was some deep connection that I felt because I'd had that experience so close together. And so that's the kernel I based this presentation on. So I'm going to share. I made a little PowerPoint. Oops. Well, little dogs go to heaven too. Life and death are one, even as the river and the sea are one. So this is the Egyptian temple Dendera, located about 37, 38 miles north of the Egyptian city of Luxor. And according to the Egyptian Museum, construction on Dendera began in the year 1995 BCE during the Ptolemaic dynasty. And it's also interesting to note that this was built during when the Greeks were present. There's evidence that Dendera temple was built on a site where there once stood another structure, probably about quite a few years before that. And as it stands today, though, even though it looks like it's in a lot of ruin, it is one of the most well-preserved buildings in Egypt. And you can see it's a lot more, there's a lot more behind it too. And there's other buildings and things on the site. So these are the pillars in the front of the structure of Dendera. And notice the faces at the top of the pillar, the entrance pillars. These pillars can be found throughout the temple. You can find these images on top of them. And as you see, the faces of these Hathors were damaged, as many of the Egyptian monuments and sculptures have severe damage to the faces and their subjects, and pharaohs, kings, queens, gods, goddesses, animals, and so on. And that happened a lot when a new ruler would come in. And so they would destroy the faces to sort of erase the past. But there's an intact Hathor. So and the Hathors were Dendera was the center of the ancient cult of Hathor. And this is a close image of one of the pillars, which carry the likeness of the goddess. Now, Hathor is worshipped by Egyptians across the empire. She's a goddess associated with music, beauty, dancing, love, joy, and celebration. Oops, sorry. She's also the goddess of rebirth and death, as well as the sky and cycles of the cosmos. And so let's move inside the temple, because this is where I first met this lady. This is Nut. She's an Egyptian sky goddess, and it's not the whole image because the whole image is like a whole ceiling. But I wanted to get her face, and I'll show a different image that's more you can see better. But this is an Egyptian sky goddess. She is the goddess of the stars and the night. Her name is translated as night. Here, I'll give you a better image of her. There she is. That one's more clear. Nut looks over and rules the hours of darkness, her hands and feet placed eternally in the four directions. In her story, Nut swallows the sun each evening. It passes through her body throughout the hours of the night and emerges each dawn as Nut gives birth to a new sun, S-U-N. If you look closely on this image, you can see the red discs as they move through her body as she swallows and then gives birth. She is the eternal, providing light by day and darkness during the hours of rest, forever repeating the cycle of birth and death, or death and birth. And I just love the colors of these images. So from Egypt, we find ourselves at a Mayan temple. And this is a Mayan funerary temple. Its location is in the modern state of Chiapas, Mexico. It is called the Temple of the Inscriptions and was built in the 7th century AD as the funerary monument for, oh boy, Kainich Jahab Pakal, ruler of then Palenque. And it wasn't until 1952, and people had been looking at this place and excavating for 200 years before this happened in 1952, that the actual tomb containing the remains of Pakal were discovered when a stone slab on the temple floor was removed, revealing a stairway. It took 2 more years of clearing earth that filled in that stairway before they could get to the tomb. And within that tomb was his sarcophagus. There he is. I love the little image of him in there. I think that image is he's wearing red and his face is made of jade or covered with jade. And that the thing above him is the top of the sarcophagus. And I read in a couple places that I read one account where the sarcophagus someone said it weighed about 7 tons, and then I read it weighed 20 tons. So regardless, it was very heavy. And that's what it looks like on top. And the 20-ton, and I'm going to share a picture of a drawing so you can see it a little better. Yeah. The 20-ton stone sarcophagus, and it could be 7, lid is rich in symbolism. Here we would find Pakal's ancestors dating back 6 generations. We find jaguar, symbolic of the place of fright, which I love that. Here we also find the cosmic tree topped with the celestial bird. I don't know if you just have to dig around and find that. The trees and branches hold a serpent, indicating that Pakal does indeed exist between 2 worlds. And also I read that there is a water tunnel underneath the pyramid, believed by some to have been used mysteriously and ritually to transport to the underworld the souls of the dead. And I'm going to add this part just because it's fun. But alternatively, to some, Pakal appears to be operating some sort of vehicle, and some ancient astronaut theorists believe the image is most certainly proof of the Earth having been visited by extraterrestrials. So I just thought that was kind of a fun image. And here, there's the richness again of that sarcophagus lid. And from what I understand, they may have weighed it, or at least certainly studied it for a short time. And then from what I understand, it's been sealed up again. And so nobody is allowed in that area right now. which brings me to Glastonbury Tor. This is Glastonbury Tor, located in the town of Glastonbury in Somerset County, England. The building you see here is the remains of St. Michael's Tower, a church built in the 1360s and subsequently abandoned in the 1580s. And there was a church there before, but apparently it was destroyed by an earthquake. And so they just kept building things on it. But Glastonbury is believed to have been the site of great activity and various settlements over centuries, Neolithic tools, Roman pottery, remains of an Iron Age settlement, and a staff made by Saxons. And medieval burial sites have all been located on this site. As you can guess, this location is absolutely steeped in myth and legend. They say that some believe that Joseph of Arimathea, or at least as far as the myth goes, that Joseph of Arimathea is believed by some to have, after the death of Christ, brought the Holy Grail to Glastonbury Tor. And while another legend holds that Joseph of Arimathea brought a young Jesus to the site, thereby establishing the Church of England. Drink of water. And so for our purposes this evening, though, I'm going to focus on another legend surrounding Glastonbury Tor, but still carries a connection to Joseph of Arimathea, and that is the Arthurian legends. As we know, the Holy Grail was a treasured object that Arthur and his knights would later quest after, and according to myth, was brought to Glastonbury Tor by none other than Joseph of Arimathea. So according to legend, Arthur, after suffering a nearly fatal wound, is brought to Avalon, or as some believe, Glastonbury Tor. Many of you will remember he was accompanied by 9 fairy queens, one of which was his sister Morgana, and we all heard of Morgana. And now some say his body is still being watched over by Morgana, and in other versions, his body is still being watched after he passed. But in other versions, Arthur did not die and is expected to return to his people one day. And according to myth, Avalon is the home of the Lord of the Underworld and is the meeting place for the dead. It operates as a gateway to the land of the dead. And Arthur's wife, Guinevere, was buried here as well with her husband. So I'll just read this. The site of King Arthur's tomb in the year 1191, the bodies of King Arthur and his queen were said to have been found on the south side of the Lady Chapel. On 19th April 1278, their remains were removed in the presence of King Edward I and Queen Eleanor to a black marble tomb on this site. This tomb survived until the dissolution of the abbey in 1539. And then royal clerk and scholar, a servant to King Henry II of England, named Gerald of Wales, writes, buried deep in the earth in a hollow oak and indicated by a wonderful, almost miraculous signs, and it was brought into the church with honor and deposited becomingly in a marble tomb. There too, a laden cross placed under a stone. Not above it is the custom in our days, but rather fixed below, which I have seen, which I have touched, these letters carved here, not raised nor projected, but turned inwards towards the stone, contained. Here lies buried the glorious King Arthur and Guinevere, his second wife, in the Isle of Avalon. And from William Blake. And did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountain green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? There's the mists. That's Avalon. I could completely understand how the Arthur myth has landed there, because apparently these myths are present a lot. Taj Mahal. So this is the Taj Mahal, and apparently it's now one of the 7 wonders of the world. It was first commissioned in the year 1632 by the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan to serve as a mausoleum to house the remains of his most beloved and favorite wife, Mumtaz Mahal. She was his second of three wives. She died after giving birth to their 14th child in 1631. And the building project took 20 years to complete and is located in Agra, India, on the southern bank of the Yamuna River. I read that 1,000 elephants and 20,000 laborers and arts and crafts people were needed to complete this building project. The structure is built from white marble and contains beautiful designs inlaid with semi-precious stones, including crystal, amethyst, turquoise jade, and lapis lazuli. Verses from the Quran are inscribed in numerous places throughout the mausoleum, including on entrances. These inscriptions are carved in a calligraphic style. It seems that Shah Jahan had intended to build another similarly scaled mausoleum on the other side of the river where his remains would be buried also. But that didn't happen because before his second structure was built, his third son deposed his father and took power. Shah Jahan spent the rest of his days under house arrest, and finally, after he died, he was laid to rest next to his wife, Mumtaz Mahal, within the monument he built for her. And today, millions of travelers visit this monument in memory of a beloved one. And that's the inside of the Taj Mahal. You usually always see just the outside, and it was kind of fun to look at some of these images and these sarcophagus, and well, virtually everything around there is just ornament, but it's all inlaid with the semi-precious and precious stones. Isn't that lovely? And I just had to do a little close-up of the beautiful, the beautiful work. So we leave the Taj Mahal, and we this is a different type of remembrance of a really special woman. This is Andy Warhol's painting titled "The Gold Marilyn." This was created in 1962, right after her death. The canvas was first painted gold, and Warhol, probably somebody who worked for him at that point. I know he had a lot of people who would prepare the canvases and things, but I bet Warhol himself probably silk screened over it. I don't know what his process was. I'm just guessing, but silk screened over her likeness. And this was taken from a publicity still from the film titled Niagara in the year 1953. The use of gold and subsequent light, not unlike religious iconography, elevates her. However, upon closer inspection, we see that the artist used garish colors on her likeness, unreal and exaggerated. I recently watched a documentary about the life of Marilyn and discovered that she was truly, truly interested in doing serious and deep roles. She was an actor who devoted herself to the study of her craft and even took classes at the famed actor studio. And yet she seemed eclipsed by her own image, the presence and the beauty, intriguing and unattainable. The very details of her death, while there was an official cause, appear to some unclear and unsettled. And I wonder if this means anything to the soul who has passed. I like to believe she's fully moved on to her next adventure. But I include her in the study because she's someone we collectively still carry with us. She sells a lot of products every year and things like that. She's a commodity in some ways, which I find just terribly sad, because I think she was much, much more than that. And I think Warhol saw her that way too. I mean, that was kind of Warhol's own thing, but I think in time that a lot of his work takes on a different sort of meaning with the passing of some of these people, or the time between the passing of some of these people. So here we are, the Day of the Dead. Now, I just love this holiday. It's beautiful, and it beautifully celebrates the connection and ongoing relationship between life and death and loved ones who have passed. In brilliant colors and lovely imagery, and also for community celebrations and family gatherings. There's more outdoor people. And look at the vibrancy. I just think that's pretty special. And fun. The Day of the Dead is widely celebrated in Mexico, as well as other countries such as Honduras, Colombia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Peru. The holiday is a result of a combination of two cultures, the Catholic holiday, All Souls and All Saints Day, combined with the rituals and traditions of a pre-Hispanic peoples of Mexico, led by a goddess known as the Lady of the Dead. The celebration takes place on November 1st and 2nd each year, and it begins at midnight on October 31st, when the gates of heaven open and the spirits of children who have passed come back to visit and celebrate. And then on November 2nd, the adult spirits do just the same. And on this side of the veil, preparations can take weeks. Cooking and cleaning and decorating burial sites, creating altars for departed loved ones, are all a part of getting ready for these celebrations. Isn't that lovely? So as I just mentioned, the food and preparation, that's a real big part of the Day of the Dead celebrations. And I need to highlight the importance of food and drink at this day. This is this is a bread, and it's called pan de muerto. It is a sweet bread, and it's one of the most traditional of the Day of the Dead foods. They are cooked in home kitchens as well as bakeries. The loaves are decorated with skull and crossbones, and the round shape of the loaf is representative of the circle of life. And families usually bake two loaves, because the first is eaten on November 2nd, and the second is placed on the altar as an offering or offerenda. This is to provide nourishment for the dead during the festival as they traveled from the world of the dead to the world of the living. This is tequila infused with marigolds. And I include this drink because it's really kind of an interesting thing. Traditionally, the marigold is a flower very prevalent in Day of the Dead celebrations. It is symbolic of death and is commonly referred to as flower of the dead. The belief is that the marigold acts as guides for the spirits of the departed. Though through their beautiful scent, vibrant and colorful flowers, marigolds create a color path when sprinkled on the floor, thereby guiding the dead to altars the living had prepared just for them. And when making marigold-infused tequila, one must allow for plenty of time, because apparently the infusion takes 7 days, but in the end you get this rich, beautiful color. And what Day of the Dead celebration would be without the sugar skull? These might seem familiar to most of us. They are especially prevalent this time of year, as November 1st is not too far off. And according to my research, sugar art appeared in the New World in the 17th century, brought by Italian missionaries. Easter celebrations included little sugar figurines of angels and little lambs. And they would be placed around the sides of altars in Catholic churches. And they're just little adornments. And so the people of the area started to learn how to make these. And they adapted it, and the sugar skull came into being. And the sugar skull, while appearing colorful, vibrant, and highly decorated, served to represent the departed. Each skull represents one individual, and their name is written on its forehead. The skull was, and still is, placed on a gravestone or home altar. And they're not really, you can eat them, but they're not really edible, because they have a lot of times they put sequins on them and glitter. And I think sometimes they are made with clay too, or it's, you can eat them, but they don't recommend it. And I just wanted to show a couple images of the cemetery, because we usually see our cemeteries as they're kind of somber places, certainly lovely and quiet. And these are just full of color and musicians and marigolds and all sorts of activity. They're just quite beautiful. And look at that. There's one at night. Isn't that stunning? Yeah. Yeah. Birth, life, and death each took place on the hidden side of a leaf. And that's by Toni Morrison. So just this is kind of my last little section of my little presentation tonight. And I'm just going to offer two activities that are important to me as I ask these questions and encounter, well, and certainly getting older, but asking questions about the continuation of consciousness and life and death and these sorts of things. And I have found that the personal altar is really important to me. And this isn't mine. This isn't my altar or anything like that. And I do keep one. But this is just one I got off the internet, and I thought it's very sweet because it has a little picture of the certainly someone that I don't know, hoping the best for, remembering. I don't know, maybe we want to be in contact with. Yeah, it's really lovely. And then the flowers and the rosemary, I'm sure, are all symbolic of something, or at least, or maybe important to the woman in the photo and the little figurines. And I just thought it was a very sweet little image. And here's another one. And I like this one because it has, of course, some artwork on the back, but it also has personal things, of course, the images, but there's images of saints, there's stones, you can see amethyst, and encouraging words, encouraging thoughts. And certainly, and candles, of course, they bring in the light, even all through a lot of this, especially with the Day of the Dead too, the candles really do bring in the light. And so I made this. So I just thought that I would include a couple images from at least one of my practices that I do and have been doing for just a couple of years now. I've been doing it for a lot longer than that in some form, but this is kind of more formal. And this is just a deck of cards I made, or a deck of cards I made. This is a card from it. And this is sort of an image. Of course, it means more than this, but it's an image of death. It's an image of death. And I remember when I was making it, and it's all made intuitively. It's really kind of lovely. So you're not in your conscious mind when you're making it at all. You really just grab magazines and images. You don't have to know how to draw or anything like that. You don't have to be an artist. But it's just intuition, and you tear out images that somehow speak to you, and you don't necessarily know why or something, but if there's some sort of kernel in there that draws you to an image, and you can make a little stack. You can just go through magazines and make a little stack. I have a bin around here that's got it's full of images I pulled out. And so this is one of those. And then you just put them together. And again, all intuitive. And in this particular process, you do ask the card certain questions. You do ask the card a lot of questions. And it's very revealing, and you only make them for yourself. You only read them yourself. It's very personal. And there's my birth. I made her a couple years ago too, but yeah. There she is. Oop, I have one more little part before I conclude. And I just found this, last night, which is really so funny because I just wanted something to kind of end up with. And this comes from a book by Ram Dass, and his book titled Polishing the Mirror, and it's on dying consciously. And we'll have it in the chat too. So he has just a few points about dying consciously. If you are to die consciously, there's no time like the present to prepare. Here is a brief checklist of some ways to approach your own death. Live your life consciously and fully. Learn to identify with and be present in your own soul, not your ego. Fill your heart with love. Turn your mind towards God, Guru, and truth. Continue with all your spiritual practices, meditation, mantra, kirtan, and all forms of devotion. Be there for the death of your parents, loved ones, or beloved animals. Know that the presence of your loved ones will remain. When you are quiet, bring them into your consciousness. Read about the deaths of great saints, lamas, and yogis like Rama Maharishi. And that's very, very from Ram Dass. If there is pain at the time of death, try to remain as conscious as possible. Medication for pain offers some solace, but dulls your awareness. And so I have some thoughts about that. To be peaceful at the time of your death, seek peace inside today. And so I guess that's all I got. Oh, I'm going to leave you with John, Paul, George, and Ringo. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Thank you. And I turn it back over. So, what time is it? Okay, so it's about 7:45.
All right.
Do we want to take a break now and just resume with discussion after? Or does anybody have any comments right now?
Love the John, Paul, George, and Ringo quote.
Yeah.
I had a quote about, I had a comment about the image of it's like Mother Earth holding a baby at the ocean. Isn't that what that's meant to be?
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That was beautiful, yes.
Oh,
Wow.
thank you.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So when I was looking at the, what you sent me before, did I see this in the slides you had now? Was there a picture of the, we can discuss after if we should take a break now, but I wanted to ask just before we go to break, was there there's a really vibrant picture of, maybe it was the picture of the, not a sarcophagus, but the nut of her. Maybe that's what I was thinking of. The Egyptian. I was struck by the colors, and the question I have is, were they that colorful? Was it that colorful?
They're really colorful.
Like uncovered. It's that color. It's not restored.
Yeah. In Egypt, I do know that a lot of the temples, they're open and have been. They're the ones that have ceilings that remain. They're still open, but over the millennia, people have gone in and been in there and had fires. Kept fires. So a lot of the ceilings and things you'll see are just full of soot and damage, but they are starting to, and a lot of, I can't remember the temple, well, probably all over Egypt, I would assume, they're starting to preserve some of the things. And there are some of them that really haven't been touched by smoke that you will see, and they're just brilliant. It's so blue. The blue is so blue, and they're very vibrant.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh. Okay.
Alexa has a comment.
Yeah, my watch doesn't understand. My watch.
I forgot to turn mine down.
No. Oh.
You'll start talking soon. But I have a comment.
Sure.
When you mentioned, Berta, about in the beginning of your presentation about the birth and then the energy you felt at that time, and then later the death, the hospice example, or you know what I mean, the death, and that the energy feels the same.
It does. Yeah.
And I have that experience as well, because in some of my work around, as an officiant or chaplain or, hospice person and doing weddings or any number of ceremonies, whether it's a funeral or a wedding or a baptism or any of these, it's all the same energy. And I know people think I'm nuts when I say that, when they go, oh, the funeral, so sad and everything. Well, of course, there's grieving and all those aspects. But from my perspective, the energy is all the same. And I think that's something wonderful to experience, that feeling. And I don't know, the group, how do you think that might relate to our topics or themes on conscious dying or continuity of consciousness? Any ideas on
I do. I think the energy you're talking about, to me, it feels like it's sacred space. It just comes into this, it's the presence of the divine. It is there for those, and some people feel it more strongly than others. Put it that way. Some people are kind of still not that aware, but when it's that whole, when you turn within and can be present in that moment, I think it becomes much more of being sacred in that touch of the divine. And I know at my mother's death, it felt like an honor to be there with her. There's just, so yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it, I guess, for that.
Well, I like how you said sacred space, and if we can tune into that. And then, of course, in the role of officiant, trying to ground or run the energy too. So I probably have had this, because of the position I'm trying to put myself in, I probably have been able to sense that more than I would have had I not been doing that kind of, it's not me, but just trying to be a conduit for
exactly
at any given event. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to a healing space. Like when I'm doing work on people with Reiki or any kind of energy work, it's being present. I guess it's that holding space too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it just seems, Berta, that when you brought that up, it's such a key point, because if we're feeling that same energy, we can only imagine at the time of our deaths, the transition would be, it's all the same energy.
Has anybody else been, witnessed a baby being born? And what did you feel in the room? Because like I said in my little talk, I asked some mothers, at least a couple, and they have no idea what I'm talking about. They're doing something much more important than I could ever be doing in that room. And but it was not even a subtle thing, and I've never felt that. It was sort of beyond the sacred space by a bit. It was just like specific in the air, and I never been able to describe it. And I think I sound kind of loony sometimes when I talk about it.
No, I'd call it a grand entrance.
Oh, that's a good word.
Soul. Yeah. I did get to be a labor coach for a friend.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But babies, when you hold new babies, it's just like welcome. It's like this presence, this soul has arrived, and just feeling that. And I imagine that would be like what holding a grandchild would be like too. Not that I don't need any yet, but. Because when you're birthing your own kids, it really that's not where your brain is at. Not until after the fact, and then you go, oh, okay.
I know when my son was born, it was like, there was a doctor, a nurse, his mother, me, and then when he was born, the room seemed fuller. I mean, we could sense his consciousness, even though he was a tot, And I don't know, there did seem to be almost like a flash of light when he came, it's like,
yes.
And they asked me if I would like to participate, and I sat across the room, coward that I am, but I saw this, and I immediately felt his consciousness, helping to fill the room. the room was fuller. There was more conscious energy in the room with him. And of course, being new, he was filled with everything that mostly what we'd forgotten. He was new. He had it all. It was incredible. The only other experience I had like that was I had a cat named Salvador Dali. And you've probably seen this painting. He's quite famous, the Salvador Dali cat. Okay, so no, actually, that was not the one. That was Salvador Dali himself. Okay, so but this cat, he was as crazy as the artist. Oh yeah, but I was there when he was born. Is the thing, and when he died, like 16 and a half years later, it was the same thing. It was the same feeling. It was crazy. I remember when he was born, that he popped out of his mother along with his little sister. And he just started wandering around the room batting a ball. Well, he couldn't see anything or smell anything. He had no teeth, but he's just like staggering along on these feeble little legs of his, batting a ball that he could not see. And yet he was playing ball, It's like, I thought, oh my gosh, and it's like, I remember when he died, it felt the same. It was just the same. I think it is the same. I think it's like you're feeling the conscious energy coming or going, but it's passing through a portal, which we might call the veil, between the worlds,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to say that too, that I can see the portal. So probably because I had a near-death experience at 5 days old and that I remember. So I saw the portal open then and was in it and then came back. So when I didn't realize that's what it was though, but, of course at 5 days old, but like, why would you? But, and I remember being at the birth of it's such a privilege that I got to see a birth because I never did again, but I was with a 2-year-old who the parents wanted the 2-year-old in the room. Like, wow, really? But it was such a calm little boy. He was such a good kid. My gosh. And so he was there and I was occupying him. And then the birth was happening and the mom was an incredibly serene woman giving birth. Otherwise you wouldn't have a 2-year-old in the room, right? But anyway, so the birth happened and I felt that flash of opening in the room and the little girl arrived and everybody else was doing their thing with the baby because I'm just off on the side. And then the father turned to me and said, do you want to hold her? And just this flash of energy, like, whoa, and I'm not in touch with this family anymore. But I felt that fullness, the awakening of her presence, but I also feel like there's an entourage that comes with babies. Like their guides are there coming in through with them. I really feel that. And then the opposite, when when my friend who passed very gently, there was a circle of 10 women, the daughter and then 9 women, and we sang Somewhere Over the Rainbow when she was passing.
Oh.
And kind of at the end of the song, there's this, when someone is gone, there's a sound and you know. And there was a presence, an expansion, because she was such a vibrant person and she hadn't been in her body, but out of her body, boom, she was like with us and excited to see us again. See and be and with us, like just this whirlwind. And I'm the only very psychic person there, but I'm like feeling this whoosh. And so I think the angels are collecting the person with them. And so the portal is very similar and very open at that moment for probably, half an hour at least.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't in the same way that there's a celebration that, and I also feel like she had continuity of consciousness this in the sense that she was out of her body. She knew we were there. To me, that's a level of continuity of consciousness, knowing you die with, she's an old enough soul, and we had talked about, we didn't pussyfoot around. She knew she was going, and we had talked about how to do it and what to expect. And I promised her I'd be there. I was talking her through it at different times that evening. Everybody else in the room was like, okay, but it was okay. It was all good. Just these loving people. And, I just think that it's just an opening, like a glorious choir,
Yeah. In some of the esoteric teachings, I'll put my finger on it by next week in my talk, but it's said that the same angel that's present at our birth is also the same one present at our death. And what you said, Hope, is making me think about that when you mentioned the angels. And it's so moving, especially if you think it's the same angel. Take any angel, but, just that continuity, that cycle.
Roberta, I have a question. In your hospice work, have you ever had the experience that there were spirits waiting in the room for that person to pass?
I didn't sense that. Yeah, I could always feel when you could, there was something different about a room where somebody was going to go soon. And I don't know if that was spirit. I don't know what that was. And I may have told this story before. One time I was working in a hospice, or the hospice that I worked at, and there was the room it was adjoining, so they just had like office dividers really between. It was a big room, and they divided between two patients. And so I was helping a gentleman get back in bed and just kind of get him situated. And I just glanced over to the other side of the room where the other patient was, and I saw smoke. And I'm like, oh gosh, oh no, fire. And I'm like, got him in bed, didn't freak him out. Tried to, wasn't screaming fire or anything like that. And I ran over there and there was nothing. And it was not a small fire. It was not subtle. And I'm sure there was something moving around that room, and so, yeah, the one hospice I worked at, and I might have shared this last week, I did share this last week, or when because Vaughn's friend was there was a nun that was still working, and lots of people at that hospice saw her after she had passed, and lots and lots of people saw her, especially the night shift, when things got quiet. But I could kind of, but I don't think it's anything special or psychic about me. I think it was just things, it gets a little thinner, and like you're saying, so like it gets fuller. The space gets fuller. Yeah. And I remember, I'll just tell this quick hospice story. I used to also go to people's homes and help them as well. And there was a gentleman, I just loved him. He was delightful. And I would go visit him once a week, I think. I would go help him, get in the shower, and we would do all those kinds of things. And we would get him all cleaned up and fresh clothes and fresh bedding and all the good stuff. And as he began to fail, his body was, oh gosh, he just got so small. He got so frail and fragile. And, I don't mean to talk about his family, but in such a negative way, but they were having a hard time with letting Dad go. They were having a hard time. They didn't like each other, the siblings, and they didn't want to let Dad go. And Dad loved this one more than that one, and blah, 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 blah. There was all that. And so, and finally, I kept seeing him. And longer than I expected to be visiting him. And finally, one day, he was so fragile, so frail. I went back to my nurse, his nurse, his case nurse. And I would never have said anything like this at work, but that day I did for some reason. And I just went to her little cube, and I said, that family won't let him go. He can't die because they won't let him. And she's like, I know. And she started talking about it. And she really did a lot of her work was trying to get the family to acknowledge that, yeah, dad needs to go. He's not well. He had cancer and all sorts of things, but they held on to him for a really long time. And so that's another aspect. The family can kind of you can get they can hold on to you too. And I think he really loved his children too, and that was a big part, maybe probably a part of it too, that he wanted them to be happy.
I don't know why it's not directly related, but it's just a little funny story about some of you know Ethel Lombardi, a healing teacher from years ago. But the part to mention is she had been working with a man who was near end of life, and he just wasn't going. And, it's like you try everything, so to speak. And it turned out that the reason he was hanging on is his mother from Italy, he was afraid his mother on the other side would be so mad at him because he left the country of his birth, which I believe was Italy, and came here. And so when that finally came out and they did some healing around that, then he left.
Oh.
But that story I've always remembered because of the person's ability to, certain fears may prevent.
Yeah.
But I can see if his mother's on the other side going, you left the old country. That poor guy. Yeah.
Funny.
Mm-hmm.
Roberta, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry I came in late.
Oh, that's okay.
I was like, oh gosh, yeah, it's Thursday. Did you, and I missed the beginning, did you talk about Shinto at all?
I did not talk about
Or
Shinto.
the ofuras? Because I know in Mexico they have I think it's ofrenda.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And then in Japan it's the ofuras where, and I bring it up when we get back together. But it's just interesting how, and I can restate this when people come back, but it's like, the families are up there, and for example, during the tsunami, people were running back in their houses to gather their ancestors off of the altars. They didn't want to leave their ancestors,
yes, please,
and then they get trapped in the waters.
Yes, please talk about that. That's fascinating. Oh my gosh. Do you imagine?
There was a really good book, and I loaned it to someone, and I wish I remembered what it was called. But it was about survivors, the whole experience of the tsunami in a small town. And some of it was about the spirits that had not crossed over, and I'll try and find it because I think you in particular would like that book.
I feel like I watched some was there a documentary about that?
There's been a lot of things.
Yeah, I
stories about taxi drivers taking people to certain places, and then and it would be they'd get there and it was an area that had been wiped out by the tsunami. Yeah. And they'd turn around and the person that they had been driving there would be gone.
Yep, I saw a documentary with that very story with the taxi driver picking someone up.
Yeah, and it happened often. It wasn't just one. It was pretty typical. But they have a much stronger belief in and they're not ghosts either. It's not really ghosts. It's just that they're still there.
I had heard after, and I just heard some stories of that. I didn't really of the rescue people after Katrina in the New Orleans. They really had they were actually having a lot of trouble with ghosts. Yeah, for what that's worth.
That's really interesting too.
Or people maybe that hadn't passed on quite quickly after that.
Well, they don't expect it.
Sudden, sudden.
A disaster like that. I imagine there was a lot of that around the Twin Towers too.
Oh yeah.
And there's probably a lot of stories that we haven't really heard.
Yeah.
So much. So
Oh, did I mention this book?
Not
I
yet.
did.
Well, you
Oh,
did to me, but not yet. to
oh,
the-
I was wondering if I had to, I want to let
You haven't
everybody
yet, yeah.
know that it's a really
Yeah.
nice resource.
I've got a story that I want to put in here.
Yes.
It can be any time. It doesn't have to be now.
Well, I think people are back. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So this just happened 3 weeks ago. So it's still very fresh. So Carol and I were walking along West Madison Lake Boulevard, or road anyway, looking and trying to figure out, is that an island or a peninsula? Well, I kind of knew it was a peninsula, but so then a couple of days later, I went on a bike ride and I kind of went over on the east side. There's a park there too. And then I kind of meditated there. And then on the way back, I thought, okay, I will go out the road that goes out on that peninsula or whatever it is. And so I turned on that road, and at some point then I could see there were flashing lights ahead of me. And as I got closer, they started up and went further. And so I didn't quite catch up to them until we got just about to the end of the peninsula where there's a park. And the flashing lights were a fire engine and a paramedic ambulance. And they had stopped, and so I caught up to them, kind of past them, and I looked over into the park, and there was somebody covered with a blanket. And I thought, oh no, did a kid die, drown or something, or what? But then I think I had just stopped my bike, and I was looking back there, and there was this turbulence in the air above me. It was like a flashing lights or panic or something. So I gave it attention, and kind of tuned in, and this person was just frantic, absolutely frantic. And he saw me looking back at the and at this time now, then out of the paramedics, they're pulling this big transport for a body on or a person on wheels and stuff. And so I look back over, first, the person was just frantic. So I said, here, I'm doing, just in my mind, I'm saying, hey, let's breathe together. Take deep breaths, so I started taking deep breaths, and that person started taking deep breaths, and I'm thinking, geez, I don't even know. Can astral bodies take deep breaths? I don't even know. But anyway, it seemed to help. And then he saw me looking back over there, and he said, did I die? And I said, it's too early to tell. We have to go to the light. You have to go to the light to find out. And so then I said, here, take my hand. And we started walking towards the light in my mind or whatever. I can't really explain it. It just was happening. And then he started to get upset again. He said, it's so dark. It's so dark. And I said, well, don't worry about it. We can sit down right here and wait, and the light will come to us. So we sat right down there. And then I'm inside a different part of my mind is saying, help. I don't know what I'm doing. And then a huge being came and settled him down and said, okay, you're done. Thank you for your help. And so I just got back on my bike and finished my bike ride. but it was such a stunning experience. And then I thought, okay, why didn't the being come be light? What did I do this right? So I asked my guides, and she said, well, I mean, the question is, well, no, I can't remember exactly how it came out. But anyway, she said, no, a light being isn't going to come in the dark spot there. Okay, and so when the light being came, they covered their bright light. And so that's why the big person that came, an angel, I would guess, wasn't all light. And because I was worried that did I do something wrong? And she said, oh, don't worry, this is just all part of your learning. But I thought, I mean, it was such a stunning experience. So I'm interested in if anybody has some feedback.
Well, Jerry, I'm wondering, was that person on a bike too? Because I think I remember seeing that on some news.
I thought, well, how would I find it? How would I find it? It would have been, so the city or the township or whatever city of Medicine Lake is just that peninsula. So it's very tiny. I thought, how would I ever find something local about Medicine Lake on news? So I thought, well, I just let it go and didn't try to look it up.
Yeah, I'll look it up because I think it came on one of my Minneapolis feeds that I have about things that are happening around the area. I think there's something about a death by a lake, and I'm not sure.
I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I'll look for it for you, Jerry. I'll send it to you.
I never saw who it was.
Okay.
I just, at one point I thought, oh, well, it was actually after I thought, oh, well, this was probably a middle-aged man who was not expecting to die, but I don't really know. So
Okay.
if you did find something, I would be delighted.
If I find something, I'll look back on my feed and I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
And somebody that was struck by a car. That sounds familiar. Something, yeah.
I don't think so, because the person was out in the middle of far from road, far from
Oh, okay.
lake.
All right. That was a different one.
So
Then.
it
Okay.
was like in the field, but the road actually does a large U,
Okay. Uh-huh.
and the park is in between. And so the
Okay.
person was quite a distance from either road coming or going around. So I just imagined somebody maybe jogging and had a heart attack or something.
Oh,
But that's just my construct. I don't know.
yeah. But you helped him transition.
Yeah,
You helped him transition.
I did. And
Sorry.
I was standing by my bicycle, holding my bicycle while all this was happening. So, I mean, it just seemed so strange. It was so vivid that I said, here, take my hand. Let's go find the light. And, just started walking with him. But that was way more vivid than the world around me. But, in terms of, I really had a sense of the sacredness. That I had the sense, but well, I don't know, of the air. I didn't sense it like you talked about, like it's in the air. This wasn't like a death scene in a hospice or a hospital, because there was nobody else around. I think somehow, how did he know I was going to be able to hear him? Or maybe he just was being frantic. I don't know.
Well, I wanted to share a resource that I came across. I just started reading it. I just got it. But this is one that I would definitely recommend as far as this subject goes. And it's called, it's in the chat too, right, Hope? The Peaceful Passages?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
This is a book called Peaceful Passages, A Hospice Nurse's Stories of Dying Well by Janet Weir, W-E-H-R, and she's an RN.
Yep.
Yep. Okay. And it's just different stories about that she's telling after her career as a hospice RN. But it also covers lots of things about what you need to just it's in terms of going to a hospice and how to get your insurance right and all those kinds of details that you really don't need to be thinking about at that time, or your family. It's just a useful guide, I think. Anyway, so I'm just going to recommend this. It's from Quest Books, from the Theosophical Publishing House, which is there. I gave an Amazon link because their website has been under construction for the last week or two, and so I couldn't link Quest Books to it. But I would recommend it. It's really good, and she covers a lot of different aspects and personal stories, and each chapter is a story of someone. And so anyway, I just thought I'd add that in because it was really good. Anybody else?
This is Joanne. I was just wanting to give that gentleman, I'm sorry, didn't notice your name, that was talking about his experience of
Jerry.
helping somebody.
Jerry.
What I see is that person was going through like what the Tibetans would call the bardo, and the dark energy was, he was being confronted with it, as we all will be. And you did a wonderful thing in terms of having him try and focus on the light to get past that, not get stuck on some of his pictures or karma and stuff. So that's what I saw happening, that you was scared, and you were close, and so you did a wonderful thing of helping him. So good job.
Well, it was a wonderful experience for me because it was so unearthly. It's so real.
So, Roberta, should I talk?
Yes.
Roberta and I talked just briefly on the break, talking about the ofrenda in Mexico for Dia de los Muertos, where there's an altar in the home for the family. There's something very similar in Japan, and I believe it's more Shinto, but it could also be Buddhist. I'm not sure where that crosses. But they will have an ofuda, which is an altar for their ancestors. And there's pictures of the ancestors. The children come home from school and they go straight to the altar and talk to their grandparents or the ones that have passed and tell them how school went. People come home and they go and they talk to their ancestors and tell them what's happening. They keep them in the loop. And I found the book. It's called Ghosts of the Tsunami. I'll put it in the link. There's a really good book about some of the events that happened in this small town with the big tsunami that hit Sendai and several small communities. But one of the things that happened during the tsunami is people were running back into their houses to gather up their ancestors. They were taking them from the altars and trying to save their ancestors, and then the waves would overcome them. They couldn't leave. They couldn't leave their family there. There's such a strong belief that their family is still with them. And when you looked at, I got so sucked into the tsunami, I had to finally back off on it. I watched it solid for days. And afterwards with the mud, they walked through the mud and with these long sticks trying to find bodies, and they could find a body, and they would all stop and do a prayer and put a marker there. And that the society, just the way that they honor, there's always that, and I wish I knew exactly what they were doing. And I think it's more of a blessing of their journey, blessing to let them go on their journey, which I think is more Buddhist. I think. But anyway, but that's what I wanted to just bring up, that there's just this connection with family is still there. And I think we see it in our Western culture with people that have all of those pictures of their family on the wall. You know, you go up someone's staircase and it's like everybody's grandmother and auntie and cousins and all of these people. And it's like, we keep that with us. It's like keeping our family with us, but we don't have that same, I don't think we have the same connection that they do in the East. You know, that the family, even though they're gone, they're not gone. And then, oh, and if you really want a delightful movie, if you have not yet seen Coco, it's Disney, it's animated, and it is perfect. The Golden Pathway, the marigolds, the music is awesome. You'll just love the music. And it's so colorful and brilliant. And it's about Dia de los Muertos. And it's just, but it's on Disney. It's a Disney movie. You could probably rent it from the library. But it really does help you understand the culture along with this storyline that, you know, it's about this little boy that kind of gets pulled into the other world. And he has to hide. He has to hide by, you know, like having the makeup on his face so he looks like someone that's dead because they're like, oh, you're not dead, you're not dead, you're not supposed to be here.
I agree. It's wonderful. I thought it would be scary, and I avoided watching it. It's a cartoon. How scary could it be? But I didn't dare watch it for a while. But it was wonderful, and the music is great. And
Oh, the music is
very
great. Yeah.
delightful. But it was also, I think, quite accurate and yeah, wonderful.
I think they did a really good job staying with the cultural aspect of that too.
Also, do you think maybe it's Confucianism? Confucius is the yeah, if that's the ancestral connection in Japan.
You don't see Confucianism that much in Japan. It's
well, maybe it's Shinto. Yeah, maybe that's right then. Okay.
It's hang on, let me see here.
And there's another TV show right now from India, where they have not from India, but it's describing the culture, and they also have an observance of really remembering the ancestors and talking to them, having the altar to the ancestors. So very much Asian.
Actually, it's both Buddhist and Shinto.
One of the things I was aware of was the tradition of the mantra chanting, both before and after death. So you're creating a container for Jerry and I know about that, but creating the container for the passing.
Like a sutra?
Jerry, is that the
Are
right
you
word?
talking about in
Buddhism? Yeah, in
Buddhism?
Hinduism, yeah. Yeah, so helping the person in their transition, and then after their transition, doing so many mantras.
It's like creating an energy way for them to follow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh.
And in a way, that's a consciousness. It's creating a consciousness around the person.
I think it's a comfort for a lot of people. You think, well, you die, we all die alone, as the saying goes. Ram Dass saying, should be with the dead when they're dying. I think, well, to a degree, but it's like holding on and saying, don't leave us ever, letting them go, just let them go and prepare them for what comes next, because I do believe angels will take you where you need to go. I think there's going to be energy taking you in and energy taking you out. They're whatever you want to call them. I think that we're not going to be alone. I think that nobody ever really dies alone. No one ever comes into this world alone. We're never alone. We have the sense of aloneness, in our society, but it's like, oh no. We're all part of one huge continuum.
Mm-hmm.
an outer aloneness, like between
Yeah.
the esoteric and the exoteric.
Right, right.
Yeah, and there's like we're always spiritually, we're always a part of a greater whole.
Yeah, but so many of us don't sense the universal consciousness that unites us all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like a big piece of what we're talking about too, is that
Yeah.
awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The real wokeness, not the media's wokeness.
When you talked about the bedside bond, where some people might be going, no, don't go, no, don't go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
ahead.
this work, what we're focusing on, continuity consciousness, the soul, the conscious dying, all these things, would someone who's, let's say with this focus, at the bedside may be grieving, but because they're focused on soul consciousness and all that, they're also helping the dying person leave as well.
Yeah, and we bring our grief to it, and it's like and then they feel sad, and then they don't want to go.
Yeah.
And then they hold on to life, and they're reluctant to go forward. I think this is a real issue. I think it fits here somewhere. I think we have to celebrate life when we go to a memorial service. We need to celebrate their life when we're holding their hand and they're leaving, and cheer them on,
That's what we were doing with my friend. The 10 of us were celebrating, and we were laughing, and we were telling stories, and we were saying, you got this, you can do this, you are such a warrior lady, you can do this, and it's time. And one of my friends she was such a truth teller. She said, look, I have got to go. You need to, she was like, I don't have time. I've got to get going. Like, me, and I'm not that patient. It was so funny. I mean, we were just laughing like, well, that's rude, but we also knew the personality to be that real with our friend. And then eventually she did have to leave the circle and not be there at the end, and that was okay too. And we knew that my friend would be fine with that too, but we were not reverent, that was for sure. At the end it was really peaceful and sweet, but we were also not reverent. We were like, you go, girl, you can do this. And I think that's exactly fit for her.
Yeah.
It was a great memory for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'll just add this little piece to all of this as well, that when we're talking about people letting them go, there, I think it might have been in this book or somewhere in my reading anyway, where the stress the importance of telling the person who may be in hospice or whatever, like telling them it's okay. And you can say that in so many words. You can say, I'm going to really miss you, or something like that. Encouraging them, though, not the family grasping and don't go, Dad, don't go, but saying to the person, I'm going to miss you when you're gone. I hope you're going to have a great trip. This has been wonderful together, that kind of thing, sort of closing up your part of your life with them and giving them, wholehearted and loving permission to go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, thank you so much for what you have meant to me. That is so important. The gratitude of thank you so much for all that you have meant to me. Just those words.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's a really conscious thing both people need.
Yeah.
Even if the other person can't say anything at that point, that they feel it back,
Yeah.
They hear it. They hear it all.
I just have one little thing to share on the subject of, well, as a hospice volunteer several years ago, I had been called to sort of be present. A daughter and son-in-law were in the room, but had requested somebody to come to be present with them, and their mother was, at end of life, and they left for a while, so I served as sort of the, part of it was, to sit with her and be with her as her daughter and son-in-law took a break. Well, it turned out that when there was a particular prayer, it happens to be the unity prayer, which many of us know. The light of God surrounds us, that kind of thing. Apparently, this woman had a strong connection in another state through Unity churches, and she was quite elderly now. And what I'm getting to is when the daughter found out, she was like, "Oh, this is a connection," because I was also connected with Unity, and I guess we just never have any idea, because she was just out of it in terms of dying, right? But I said that prayer, and she said it with me. So she perked up, said it with me, and that was it. It was just a little connection there, and she was happy to say it. So what happened is, I'm skipping some other parts, but when I was home then, let's say within a couple hours later after the visit, I was sitting on my sofa in my office at home, and I felt this strong energy in the room, and I just intuitively knew that it was such an energy of gratitude. And at first it wasn't clear, but I sensed it as moving, in the room. But I knew it came quickly that it was this woman. And it turned out she had passed probably a couple hours after I had had that visit. And so to me, it's like amazing. We just don't know. To her, it was a bit of a gift for her end of life. But also look at how we had no connection other than that. Look how I'm sorry, I'm not finding the words, but just the fact that person's energy was able to connect with me so soon after she died, it's just amazing. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that with you. Because I think about how quickly after we pass, we're not contained in one form, how we can spread out farther. Probably visit people simultaneously. I don't know. What do you have to say about that?
Well, Susan, I have a similar story with my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Cora. And Paul was at a retreat, so he was silent. I was, but he was at the Zen Center here, and so he would sleep it's just a couple blocks away, so he would sleep at home at night. And so during the day when he was at the retreat, and I was out shopping, and I was just walking through this mall, kind of a quiet place, and all of a sudden, as quick as that, like I felt his mother, like, and she had been in a nursing home for some time, and I felt his mother like swirling around me, and she was like kind of like in and out of me, it was like, whoo, and it was so lovely and great. It was just very loving. And there was a certain sense of gratitude. It was really quite lovely. And so, and I never did this, but that day I actually, because I couldn't call him and say, I think Cora is visiting me. I sat down and I actually wrote him an email that I figured he may read when he got home that night or at the end of his weekend. I sat down and I wrote him an email telling him about it, and I just kind of expressing how grateful I was to have known her and just these kind of things. And then so that night when he was sleeping at home, we got a phone call about 4 a.m. and she had just passed. So she was doing that, and she was out hours before.
Yeah. Wow,
Yeah.
I love that. And that's a good point. A segue to something for next week too, because there'll be some talk about, the moment of death is one thing, but exactly what you said, Berta, the energy is way before, at least for some, already on the move.
Yeah, I think she was out. I don't think she was with that body at that point.
Right.
I think that had probably been going on for a while. She had something called Lewy body dementia.
Oh God. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's even at the moment of death, though, where the soul does come in and collect. So even if they've been, the body itself and the brain have been so out of it, there's a moment where the final process, like even the person I was describing, she was there present because that was her soul now. That wasn't the body processing, because she had been quite unconscious, for a while. But then at the end there, she was hearing us sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And she said, when I die, I want you to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. So we're like, hey, time to sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, people. I just spoke and went, hey, you guys, get the recording. Because I knew that, I get chills telling you this, but I felt her leaving. I'm like, she's rising up, time to sing. And we did. We're kind of croaking and singing, crying, but we got through it. And, so we did what she said and she knew it.
There's something magical about that song. Judy Garland, late in her career, I think it was on her TV show on CBS, she said, people keep asking me to sing that song, and I've sung it thousands of times. Someone says, don't you get tired of it? And she said, no, because it makes people so happy to hear that song. It means something to a lot of people. I think it's a special song.
Yeah.
Well, that whole story, of course, as we know, had special built-in esoteric meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Rainbow Bridge. It's absolutely creating the rainbow body
That's it.
that it's all encoded in there, and there's some part of us that know that.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the Rainbow Bridge next week.
Cool.
Oh, good.
Fabulous. Okay.
It reminded what you were saying. Berta said something somebody else said, and then Vaughn, you said something about the energy. It reminded me of last week when you were talking about the moving and the light and what you did when you worked with Deb, your friend.
Yeah.
She was dying, and you helped prepare her for a much easier transition. I mean, she did the work, but how do you?
We traveled in the light, with the light, to the subtle planes of existence via the conscious energy that would be part of her subtle energy bodies. We took her emotional body, her mental body, her causal body, her buddhic body, and we walked. We walked forward. And it is interesting that we did it that way, because it was a Deb way that she wanted to do it. I just knew that she wanted to do it that. And she would have been disappointed if she couldn't, step on the bridge of the Enterprise and rematerialize somewhere else. And I said, by God, this woman's going to do it. This is how. So it seemed to really work. And doing it with somebody is really kind of strange, Now we could all do this on our own, but she really needed to know how. And I think, I think because of that, I think more and more, death isn't what we think it is. Life isn't what we think it is. We're not fully alive, and when we die, we're not really dead, And I think, in her case, it occurs to me that if you really consciously die in that way, and you're able to move in the light in that way, knowing that light is all around you, that you can literally go anywhere and do anything at that point. We're all programmed to do a certain thing, and some people have a different idea of what that is,
Yeah.
I just love how you get these deep theosophical people together, and we have a whole different spin, but we can just go deep on this topic. So many people are like, oh, we don't want to talk about this, but it's like, oh yeah, no, this is what we want to talk about, because that's what life is.
And I was reading about this sort of, about, the conscious continuity and preparing yourself. And there's no bad time to start preparing yourself for this.
No.
And that what you just said, Hope, talking about it and going deep and just being more familiar and comfortable, and listening to the stories and the anecdotes and all the things that can, I think, make us certainly more resourceful at the time of we passed or as we witness our loved ones passing.
Mhm.
Okay, I tell you about Miss Polly, my friend Miss Polly. So when I lived at the house in St. Paul on Dayton Avenue, this wonderful old Victorian house, you know, this is where I lived with Deb. But after I lived with Deb, I went out on the porch one morning, and you know, it's like, well, you know, when someone leaves, someone comes. You know, Deb was gone, and I went out on the porch, and somebody left Miss Polly. Miss Polly was a giant Rose Point Siamese cat, a female cat. And she was huge. She was like 20 pounds, and she was really, really old. I took her to the vet, and I said, well, we should check her out. And he says, my gosh, you have any idea how old this cat is? Well, that was nothing. She lived another like 12 years. You know, she lived a really old life. And Miss Polly just loved it. I remember she showed up with a pearl necklace, and she cleaned the pearl necklace every night. And one day it broke when she was cleaning it, and I just threw it away. And later on, I thought, geez, those might have been really real pearls. I didn't know. I wouldn't know one if it saw, you know, if I saw one. They didn't seem like plastic pearls. but anyway, I digress. So Miss Polly eventually got brain tumor. I took her in for her teeth cleaning. She was, after all, like about 22 years old. And I took her into the vet in St. Paul and have her teeth cleaned. He says, I think her teeth are pretty good, but we'll clean them. And he discovered that she had cancer in the mouth, and he tried to cauterize it, but it had already spread. So we let her live a regular life at home. We had like home hospice for Miss Polly. And she had many, many friends there because, you know, I collected these little guys. They'd show up on the porch and I'd take them in. And she had a lot of friends. And when Miss Polly died, all of these other cats walked up. First of all, when she died, she just collapsed and she fell off the bed on the floor. And I picked her up and she was stiff as a board. Rigor mortis set in almost immediately. And I checked her pulse, no. I checked her breath, no. There was no activity, no breathing, no pulse. She was starting to get stiff. So I laid her out. I said, you know what, guys, we're going to lay her out here tonight. And in the morning, we'll have a proper burial, which, you know, subsequently, they all visited that and they would continue to visit that site because she was an important person in their little world and in mine, too. But here's the thing. They all went by and they kind of kissed her on the head. And I thought that was really sacred. And then they all sat down. And I patted her on the head. I said, goodbye, Miss Polly, after they had done that. And then I lay down to sleep. And then that cat that I thought was dead, her head snapped up, it swiveled around, looked at me, and she said, meow. And then she flopped down dead as a doornail.
Oh my God.
So all I could figure is that she got halfway to where she was going, and she says, geez, I should say goodbye. And she did.
Wow.
And I said, whoa. I said, is there anything else you want to say, Miss Polly? But that was it. Those were her final words.
So when her head popped up, what was your reaction at first? Were you just
Shocked. I said, shocked, because, I mean, she showed every sign of being dead, you know, for several minutes.
Yeah.
But no, she was just kind of, you know, it's almost like she died, but then she said, you know, I'm going to come back and say goodbye to that guy.
Wow.
I mean, he did feed me, right, every day. So, yeah, sure.
I had read an account, I don't know, remember it was in a book or somewhere, of a woman who said, she goes, I've just witnessed a cat funeral. And she had the same thing. She had an elderly cat who had passed away, but she had a whole bunch of cats. Like, I don't know how many she had, but she had quite a few. And she laid the cat out on the bed. Yeah. And she said each cat from oldest to youngest gathered around the body. Yes. And the oldest touched the nose and left the room. Then the next, and according to age, touched the nose and left the room until the youngest touched the nose and left the room.
Yeah.
And
I-
she just said, I just saw a cat
No,
funeral.
there's something like that. I mean, I think they're like elephants. I think they really do honor the
Mhm.
dead, you know. And I remember that I had a roommate who he installed air conditioner. He was all over the country. Well, he was in Florida when his cat Batman died. He had two cats, Batman and Robin, and Batman took care of Robin. So he was very sickly, but he just hung on to take care of Robin. And because the neighbor cats bothered Robin. Well, so I had another roommate who had a bunch of cats, and I had a bunch of cats. So to make a long story short, we had a lot of cats. So when we were going to take Batman to the doctor, because we kept trying to get this guy who owned it, who wasn't home, to take care of it and do something, and he said no, no, no. And finally, a couple of us said, we don't care, we don't have permission, but we're taking him to the vet because he seems to have like a bowel obstruction. He was getting gaunt, not eating. And so, we got our coats on. It was winter, and we went to get Batman, and he dropped dead right there when we were going to pick him up and take him to the vet. And then all these cats walked by. We were at the top of the stairs. We were ready to take him. And all these cats came by, and they did something like they touched heads to their foreheads to him, like a head bump. I mean, there's something to that, So they have their own way of saying goodbye, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't had my two cats, not the two I have now, but my prior two cats, the night before one passed. No, within a day or two. The two cats would sit on the back of the sofa.
Mhm.
And they were never, occasionally they'd cuddle and stuff, but usually they weren't that cuddly together. And each day over a period of several days, they'd get a little closer on the top of the sofa. And I was sitting there watching TV, so I'd see this happen. And by the night before, which turned out the night before she passed,
Mhm.
that's what you just said. You could see they were head to head,
Yeah.
touching, and just there. And it was like, oh my God, I knew she was saying goodbye. And it was a momentary, sacred moment. And you could just feel it. And they knew. But anyway, so that cat did die the next day, but she died in my arms on the way to the vet. So I haven't had an experience like where you have a cat die at home and like both of you said were the other cats.
Yeah. And I think there's something about the forehead, and the head. I mean, in our tradition, in let's say in Eastern spiritual science, certainly in theosophy, we think of the seat of the divine seat of the soul would be like in our forehead, right? It would be like your highest chakra. It would be like the divine essence. It would be the Atma. It is our highest crown chakra, and I think that they see it exactly that way as we do. Yeah.
Wow.
Cats are like another race of beings.
Yeah.
Most
Yes.
cats,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're like spies that come here to observe us and then report back what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, the Egyptians certainly held them in high regard.
Yeah. They thought that if you lived an exemplary life, you might be reborn as a cat.
Mm-hmm. Does anyone remember the movie Thomasina?
Oh my
God. Yeah.
Do you remember when Thomasina goes to cat heaven and goes up the stairs
I'm gonna
and there's
stop
lines
recording.
of bus steps?